Welcome to Beth Israel, the West Temple on Triscuit Road in Cleveland. We're here for what I hope to be an extraordinary night of discussion between two wonderful people who are running for the job of Lakewood Municipal Court Judgeship. There's only one judge in Lakewood. We have 50,000 people, one judge. Judges are the only people who get a 6-year term. Everybody else gets 4 years or 2 years. So it's the longest term for any elected office. It's also the highest paying job in the city of Lakewood. So it is important that before you go to vote, you have an opportunity to listen, to view, and listen again to what they have to say, to my questions and any questions that you may raise. Tess, could you tell us your name and your current occupation?
Yes, I am Tess, Neff, and I am the court administrator at Juvenile Court.
Sara.
Sara Fagnilli. I am the city prosecutor in the city of Hudson, in the city of Vermillion, and then assistant law director, prosecutor in the city of Streetsboro.
And how long have you held those three positions?
Streetsboro about 3 years, Vermillion about 3 years, Hudson off and on 6.
And how about you, Tess, in your job?
Currently 6 years.
So overall, Sara, tell us, what are the most important attributes for someone who wants to be a judge at the municipal level?
I think, Peter, experience is the most important attribute, and having the right experience for the job. I think that a good judge is going to have spent some time in the courtroom and litigated cases and understand what it means to represent somebody and understand what impact that decision that judge might make will have on those litigants, whether they're civil or criminal, whether it's the state or the defendant. I think that's the most important attribute. And then having certainly the ability to be fair and impartial and patient with the people that come before the court.
Tess, does Sara have those attributes?
I don't know. I've never worked with her, so I don't know the answer to that.
And tell us what you believe are the most important attributes for the position.
I do believe experience is very important. I actually did the job in Lakewood as an acting judge and magistrate for 10 years. So I did exactly what Sara is explaining, listening to cases, making thoughtful decisions. You have to be a very good listener and impartial. That it's critical. And you have to take into account individuals' their social life, what's going on with them, if there's mental health, trauma, and you need to be in tune with all of that. And I've worked in that area for the last 18 years plus, so I have a lot of experience, and I've never had a complaint about a judicial decision I've made. So I've been in that court. I know the law, the workings of the court, and I believe with my experience as a court administrator, that's a great strength I have on how to operate the court and what's important as far as getting, Supreme Courts reported. Because as a single court judge, you are the court administrator, you are the HR director, you are the director of the budget. So you're wearing all those hats, and I have significant experience in all those areas.
How does your current position, trying to go back and forth, how does your current position set you up for the job you want to have?
Because it has taught me how to run a court efficiently, effectively, implementing technology, investing in your staff with training that's critical to make sure, particularly the clerk's office for customer service, also the probation department, it's significant. There's a national trend of probation transformation, and it's about keeping people in the community and trying to prevent people on low misdemeanor cases being incarcerated for any reason, as long as it's a nonviolent offense and they're not a risk to themselves or others, or it's not a safety issue in the community. And I've learned all that as the court administrator, and how to run a budget, how to assess the costs, and there's just a lot I would bring to the table as court administrator.
And Sara, how does your current, I guess it's 3 A, B, and C positions, first of all, is your job definition about the same in all 3 of those currently?
Yes, with the exception of in streets where I do a little more civil work. I don't do civil work in the other 2 places. Also in the last 6 years, I've also worked in a major law firm and done a lot of other civil work as well, in all courts, including significant trial experience at federal, state, and municipal level. So I think that experience makes a big difference. I've run municipal law departments as well, so I likewise can budget and manage what needs to be managed. The other thing you have to remember about Lakewood Court is there is a clerk of courts. The city of Lakewood has an HR department. While the judge may be responsible for all those things, it's the judge's job to be the judge. The judge will have magistrates, much like when Tess was working there, that handle typically lower level cases, small claims, evictions, hearings, things like that. I think in Lakewood, we need to have a judge who's experienced in handling all the cases and recent experience. The law changes. I mean, you can look at any one of the number of cases that I handle. I can look at that subject matter and see 4, 5, 6 more changes in that law in the last 10 years. And you have to be up with that. And the only way you can be up with it is if you're working on it all the time.
So I've asked everybody who has sat here, regardless of what their position is, what I think is a core question, and that is, as I line that up with this position, we have Judge Pat Carroll, who is extremely honest, extremely honored, had a terrific career, is incredibly well thought of among his fellow judiciary. And everybody in the legal profession knew he was going to be so-called aged out, couldn't run again. That's a preface for the question is this term of office one of opportunity or ambition? Are you running because you saw the chance, or are you running because this was an ambition you've had? We'll start with Sara.
Both. So you're right. Everybody's known for a long time when Judge Carroll was going to have to retire. And from my perspective, it was a matter of, A, it's something that I've always wanted to do. I have spent the greater part of the last 10 years increasing my work in municipal court so that I was well versed in it, both on the civil and criminal side. But the other part of that had to be, where's my family at that point in time? Where are the kids? Where's Dave? What does our life look like? And does it make a run for this position make sense? I think it's a fair evaluation. We made that evaluation and decided that now was the time to do it. But for me, with 35 years of experience, I've got a lot I can bring back to the community. It's a community court. You impact the people, for the most part, who live in the community. Yes, there's some transient cases with the freeway and those kinds of things, but you're working with people in the community. So you want to make sure you're fair and impartial to all of them, and that you address the issues that are out there. These are, for the most part, on the criminal side, lower level misdemeanors, for the most part, nonviolent, but not all. So you want to make sure that you're addressing each case individually. And so if there's some underlying issue in the case, whether it be alcoholism, drug abuse, mental health issues, that you have the resources available. And Judge Carroll's done an excellent job of making sure he has those resources there. So that's in place for anybody who comes next. And I've had the pleasure when I'm out talking to residents, finding other people in the mental health field who have all said, yes, we'll be more than happy to come in and add our expertise to this as well. And so you can address those problems. So for me, it's coming back to serve the community. Is this something I had to do? No, it's something I chose to do. Okay,
and so Tess, same question to you. Is it because of the opportunity or the ambition that you wanted this job, or both?
Again, both. As I said, I worked there a decade, hired by Judge Carroll, and so he was a great mentor to me. And I always imagined the opportunity to go back, but would never run against him for obvious reasons. And he's done a wonderful job. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm on Lakewood City Council now, and that's one of the reasons I ran for Lakewood City Council, because I wanted to give back now. And this opportunity for judge became available, and I know I have the broad breadth of experience deciding cases in juvenile court under the same criminal code that is applied in Lakewood. So I have recent experience in addition to the court administration and being a judicial decision maker. And I'm prepared to walk in, and it would be a very smooth transition.
So when you drive through Lakewood, like any other community in the middle of an election, there are signs. Yeah. And this is clearly an off year, be it no state issues, no federal issues. In Lakewood, we don't have mayoral issues. We just had that 2 years ago. We have councilmen running, and then we have one judgeship. How important do you both believe signs are? Start with you, Tess.
Signs, I mean, signs don't vote. And so my strategy has always been, I usually don't ask people to put a sign. I wait for them to ask me because I know they want it and then they're going to support me. I think they are important to remind people to vote, particularly in this type of election where sadly a lot of people, they just don't really care or take interest in judge races or council races. So it's a good reminder for them. So I do think they're important in that sense. Are they a telltale of who's going to win the race? Absolutely not. I don't believe that.
How about you? What do you think, Sarah, about signs?
I agree. So there's, particularly in today's day and age, there are all sorts of ways you communicate with voters. So there's social media, there's digital ads, there's the good old Lakewood Observer where we can put ads in, all sorts of other things you can do. But for some people, they don't have all those things. They may not own a computer or look at some of the things that you put out there. And so that's one more way you can message to people so they are aware there's an election, and then they're aware who the candidates are, so at least at some point they could do some research themselves, and certainly they're going to get flyers in the mail and those kinds of things. But if they don't, for whatever reason, it gives them an opportunity to say, who is that person? Why are they running? Why do I see these 2 names, or for council those 6 names, or the school board, the 3 that are out there?
And how do we, this is a different era than even we had 5 years ago about the use of social media. Mm-hmm. So again, we'll start with you this time, Sarah. Do you have a Facebook page that is you keep an eye on yourself as to communicating with the people on social media?
I do. I do have there's a Facebook page that's set up just for the campaign, and then I have my own personal Facebook page that I've had for a number of years. It started just keeping track of my kids and my cousins and my long-lost friends, and it's turned into something completely different than it was 10 years ago when we started. And I heard today it might not even be Facebook anymore. It's going to be something else.
New name, right.
But no, we set up a separate judicial page so that we could communicate with voters that way. Do I watch it? Do I post on it? Occasionally.
And Tess, do you have the social media?
I do too, yes. It's almost, I really was never into social media that much. Kind of what Sarah said, to keep up with family and friends. But I do have it now, and I monitor it myself, and I'll check messages from individuals and respond back and post pictures and things that, I may be doing. So, yes.
So we just had a primary, how many weeks ago? 5, 6 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. On a Tuesday after Labor Day. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you will, 10% of the available voting public voted. Is that a fair number?
It's more than that.
Little more than that.
Yeah.
So how do you create more interest to at least hope we can get to the number? I mean, a presidential election, only 50% of Americans eligible voters vote. Do you both have ideas that you've been able to put in place to get people out to vote in 13 days? What's that with you, Tess?
Yes, I talk with friends and family and try to kind of do the communication chain that way, the old-fashioned grassroots way. I have put the information on my mailings, please vote, reminding them November 2nd, did the same for the primary, and also on my social media. And, I think, like the Lakewood Observer, they do a good job of putting a message in there as well. And the League of Women Voters, they try to get involved and message, the same.
Yes. And how about you, Sarah? What do you think we can do to get more people interested in this election?
I think we'd all like to know the answer to that, Peter. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember exactly what the presidential numbers were. They were certainly much higher in Lakewood. I think 70% or something along those lines. If we see, 25% at this point, it'll probably be a lot.
Yeah.
But there's no real way of knowing. So, and I don't know how you get people to vote if they're not going to vote anyway in a particular kind of race, because you'll see numbers go up. Next year you'll see numbers go up for the state race, and then when the federal races come back, you'll see those numbers go back up again. It's a trend that's been there for a long time. I don't know how you change it.
We'll start with you on a different area of questions, Sarah. And Tess mentioned this in her beginning statement. How many people work in the courthouse under the tutelage of the judge?
There's between 21 and 22 at any point in time. I think it's been as high as 25. I think it's running about 21, 22 right now. Of that, probably half a dozen of them are part-time employees, and that includes the judge. So it's a pretty small staff at this point.
And do you think her number's close to being
Yes.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
So how many of them, if you know, will leave when the judge leaves?
I've heard, I haven't confirmed with anyone, that there's several that will retire. Now I know the probation officer, the chief probation officer, she already retired in August, I believe. And there is one bailiff who left, I don't know how long ago. So those are 2 vacancies. But as far as retiring, I've heard of 2, but I'm not, I've just heard it through the grapevine.
And have you heard anything, Sarah, about that issue?
I have no idea. I mean, as far as I know and hope, all those employees will stay.
Yes.
I think there's a lot. I've been through many transitions of administration, and there's a lot to be said for having people with institutional knowledge. So I hope people, and certainly if people are eligible and able to retire and that's what they choose to do, then great. Then we'll do what we have to do to hire to fill, depending on what the needs of the court are. But absent that, no, I mean, I wouldn't expect, I hope nobody would go unless they have the opportunity for some other reason.
So when people who are not lawyers, what we'll call the pro se defendants, come to court, we've all observed that sometimes it's the people who have lawyers who go first, and sometimes it's the people who have lawyers who get better deals. Sometimes if you just hire the right female or male lawyer, sometimes you end up with a better resolution than somebody who cannot afford a lawyer. How unfair is that in your view? I'm not for sure who goes first.
I can't remember. Am I next? I think I might be.
Go for it.
It's very unfair, for one. And my plan is, if I'm elected, to help alleviate some of that for the pro se so that they don't feel less confident coming forward, is I plan to implement a help kiosk which would provide guidance and resources. I already have in mind how I'm going to staff that, when I think it would basically be financially neutral. I'm confident I could get many attorneys who would volunteer in addition to the court staff, so that actual legal advice could be given, because I think it's critically important, even if you can't afford an attorney or aren't entitled to one, that you understand the court process, what you're about to get into, and how to navigate, so that you can go in there confidently and, speak for yourself. In particular, you see in landlord-tenant cases, the tenant is typically the underdog, the landlord's usually more sophisticated, they've been going through these eviction processes and second cause hearings, for years, and the tenant shouldn't be, have less protection because they don't have an attorney. And I think that's one way to alleviate those issues.
And what are your thoughts, Sarah, on the supposition that I made and then how we might try to resolve it?
I think, well, your supposition may be true in certain places. It's not true where I work. A couple of different things happen. Number one, it's partly how you schedule cases. So I handle municipal cases every day. I'm in court every week. I deal with pro se defendants on a regular basis, and I give them no better or worse deal than I give somebody who has a lawyer, because there are certain rules that are in place, and we follow them. And, that's what I say before about helping in municipal court. So even as a prosecutor, just for an example, I see somebody who comes in who doesn't have a driver's license. Okay, so we sit down and talk about it. Why don't you have your driver's license? What is it that you need to fix? Let's pull out your leads and take a look. Well, you've got an unpaid traffic ticket here and an unpaid traffic ticket here, and you owe the BMV some money, so get these paid, and then you can go on a payment plan. And your prosecutor should be doing that. And if not, the judge should be encouraging them to do that, because that's how you help people. I have an issue with the whole help kiosk idea, because I think it is going to blur the line of what's the proper practice of law and what's not. Legal aid is available in the landlord-tenant area. I talked to a legal aid lawyer not that long ago who was just in Lakewood Court, and they're available, especially now, the way things are with the pandemic. It's the whole eviction landlord-tenant issue is getting a lot of notice, especially from the House Supreme Court, who just released an eviction toolkit about a month and a half ago, based in part on some of the work that Judge Carroll has done. So I think it's important to make sure those resources are available, but you got to be very careful about establishing that attorney-client relationship and just giving out advice. That's a line that has to be very clearly delineated. I also know that certainly in criminal cases, you can have a list, you can appoint public defenders. The city doesn't have a specified public defender. They tend to appoint attorneys who are willing to do that work. And that's fine, you would continue that, but you know, the cases shouldn't be scheduled such that somebody with a lawyer goes first and somebody else doesn't. If you're properly scheduling your cases, that's not an issue.
So let's talk about the issue of what we could call public defenders, or trying to find lawyers for people in matters that are not minor misdemeanors where they have no right to a lawyer.
Right.
But first-degree misdemeanors all the way through 4, there's a jail term possibility. They have a right to counsel.
That's right.
Does Lakewood maintain a list of available lawyers that they provide to the defendants at the arraignment, saying, if you qualify, here's the name of the lawyer who can help you? Is that a part of the stage at the arraignment process?
It's my understanding that so usually what you'll have to do is qualify. There should be documents that have to be filled out by the defendant to show that they actually qualify for that public defender, or the city paid for a public defender. It's my understanding, but I haven't asked him recently, that Judge Carroll does maintain a list, and most places do, unless there is a staffed public defender. A couple of the courts that I work in have staffed public defenders, so they're sent either by the county or it's somebody the city has hired. If you don't have that, and I don't believe Lakewood does, then you'd have to have a list upon which you could appoint people who are qualified to handle those cases.
And so, Tess, let's assume that Judge Carroll has maintained that type of list. Do you know whether he has
He
it?
does, yes, there is a list.
How does a lawyer, this is a two-part question for you, how does a lawyer get on that list?
I don't know how they get on his list, but I know how we do it at the juvenile court. You have to apply and just, you know, provide your transcripts and that you're all up to date with CLEs and that there's no issues, and you're on the list. It doesn't cost anything, and it's distributed. All the judges have access to it, and the magistrates, and they can work from that list, as well as the public defender, because we do have those folks on staff and utilize them regularly.
Okay. There's always the specter in every municipal court, certainly the one that I'm working in. Every Monday morning there are holdovers in jail because of violence related to family issues, domestic violence. I can't tell you whether I think the research shows it's gotten worse in the past 18, 16 months because of COVID. I can merely tell you very, very confidently that it never seems to stop. I read reports all week long about domestic violence. Do you know how serious a problem it is in Lakewood through the court system?
I don't think it's any bigger of a problem than other issues. It exists. It'll always exist. I agree with you. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I haven't seen any evidence based on what I've read or just people I've talked to in the court that there's been an astronomical increase in DV cases. In the juvenile court, we have not seen a lot more. A few, maybe it's a short uptick, but not much at all. So I agree with you. I don't know that it's any kind of relation to COVID or not, people being home, stuck together.
Yes.
But,
and so, Sarah, does does Lakewood Court have an assigned advocate for the domestic violence victim? Do you know how they have that process?
Yeah, I think that they do.
Yeah,
they do.
And in most courts do. Yeah, you have to have them. And you know, just to follow up, I can tell you from my experience in the last 18 months, domestic violence cases did go up.
Yep.
And there's no question that a lot of it had to do with COVID and COVID-related pressures. When you hear the stories, you can see that. I think the documents all show that as well. If you look at the court's latest annual report and back for a few years, I think the numbers are, you know, fairly close to one another year to year. You know, but we saw in all the courts that I practice in an uptick in domestic violence and a downturn in driving under the influence cases because people weren't out and driving. And then as soon as things started opening up a little bit, those cases went right back up and the DVs didn't necessarily come down. So, you know, unfortunately on my docket in any given time, I probably have a half a dozen to a dozen DVs pending. And it's a problem that we really need to get our arms around. And typically there's some cause. I mean, it's interesting to see some of the patterns that go certain times of the year, and things like that, that I, after doing this for a long, long time, they're very obvious.
And that will begin about 3 or 4 weeks from now, right?
It's
Get past Halloween.
It starts in,
Holidays.
Before Thanksgiving.
It's the holidays, it's the start of summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are outside. There's an issue that you both know, because I did email to both of you about this a few weeks ago, and that is the issue in Lakewood. I'm just going to guess, I know there's over 100 institutions that have liquor licenses, bars, taverns, restaurants. The city's, I think, 3 miles wide by 1.5 miles. It's the most dense city between New York City and Chicago, and we have all the bars to show for it. Was it a year ago that we had the young woman who killed the 2 19-year-olds?
Yeah.
I found out that Lakewood Police does not do OVI checkpoints. And the numbers of OVIs have gone down 25% in the past couple of years. Do you think that more attention has to get paid to the abuse of alcohol and then entering into a car and driving somewhere situation in Lakewood? We'll start with Tess.
I mean, sure, it always needs attention, but I mean, the police, while they're patrolling, they need to look. Do I believe police should be at a bar monitoring people walking out? I mean, that's a resource that's stretched so thinly as it is. You mentioned checkpoints. I think that is a good idea, but the number of cases Lakewood has would have to justify that resource as well. And I just don't know that the police force is capable of doing that. And they would have to collect data, which I don't know that they do, on where the OVIs are. You'd have to figure all that out. That's why data collection is just really important overall for all type of cases. But yeah, it's very important, and it needs to be monitored because lives are lost and people get hurt.
Your thoughts, Sara?
I don't disagree. I do think that the pandemic made this much more difficult because I think you found that all of a sudden there aren't any more Uber and Lyft drivers. I can't tell you how many cases I've handled that are OVI related where I'm like, you look at somebody and say, why didn't you just take an Uber? And they're because I couldn't find one, because the drivers all lost their jobs. And so, and the other thing I've noticed recently, and I can't explain this, I wish I could, that the OVIs that I'm seeing are all serious OVIs. They're high blows. They're young people who, if you don't get them off this train, are going to find themselves facing a felony before too long, because it doesn't take long to get to that level. And so I think it's important for the court, once you have those cases, that in the realm of your sentencing, you can do some things that discourage that kind of behavior. And I think that's important to do, and the courts that I work in have those kind of programs, and I would certainly be looking to implement them myself to the extent they're not there already.
And another issue that I raised with both of you is that Lakewood is one of the very few cities, I think there's 3 in the entire county, that has reduced penalties for OVI compared to the state code. The first offense state code is 3 days school or 3 days jail, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lakewood, I don't know how many years ago, the council decided that we should have no jail requirement, no 72-hour requirement. And I've talked to both of you about the fact that Judge Carroll has allowed that to happen, that there have been defendants who, for a variety of reasons, get to take an OVI and don't get the state-mandated penalties. Sara, what do you think of that idea?
I don't like the idea, because I think the most important part on a first-time OVI is the educational component. I'm not convinced that the school at the hotel is the best way to do that. I've seen a couple of alternatives used that I think work much better. But I think that educational component is so important, and that you can't let that opportunity go by.
How do you feel, Tess?
As far as, you mean amending it to the local code as
The
opposed to
idea
state code?
that some people in this city get an opportunity where it's not available in the greatest majority of other communities, to get a reduced sentence. on an OVI? First OVI.
I think the education is the most important part, and I do like what Judge Carroll does, because as I mentioned to you, is a lot of the folks that come in, they can't afford that 3-day hotel stay. And so the attending the educational meetings is not only educational, but it's a learning experience. They're with other people, and it's a forms of support for them. And so I'm in favor of education. You need to change. Throwing someone in jail doesn't necessarily change the mindset. That's what you have to change, and that comes with education and supports.
So let's change to another area that I thought would be important for people to know, and that is, how does a judge communicate to the overall community? I mean, you're a councilwoman, we'll talk about that in a few moments, so you get to go to council meetings. But it seems like a judge in Lakewood, among all other cities, how does the community hear from the judge?
Right now, I don't know that they really do. Judge Carroll just has a different philosophy, and that's perfectly fine. What I would do, my plan would be completely different. My plan is to have a regular schedule of appearing in all the schools, talking with the students in the auditoriums and for education. I also would do town halls in different areas of the city with a particular focus, honestly, in Ward 4. Those are the people who we need to get out to vote more and educate.
That's the Eastern Edge.
Yes, and just to educate them about what's available to them at the court, if they need help with a particular situation, say a landlord-tenant issue. And I also would create a newsletter that would go out, and I'd work with the city. It's either a part of theirs or our own, but that's how I would get the message out about what's happening in the court, because good things do happen. It's just not a place where bad things occur.
What do you think, Sarah, about how a court can communicate? We have 50,000 people, and that's a lot of people. How can the court, or should the court, and how can the court take a role in communicating to everybody?
So there's a couple of different things you can do. First of all, majority of our residents aren't ever going to see our court.
There you go.
They just aren't, okay? And I knock on people's doors now, and I talk to them, and they're like, I've never been up there. I don't ever intend to be up there. I got one speeding ticket, and I paid it. So there's plenty of that. But you talk to them and say, look, but if you have a problem, here's how you handle it. And I think you can easily write articles. I mean, Judge Carroll has done a great job. First of all, when I was the law director in Lakewood, I would see him regularly at DARE graduations. You're in the schools, you're in that program. He did a lot of that, and it was great. And those are fun things to be able to go do. I was recently interviewed by a group of 6th graders on how lawyers use math. It was, fun. And I think those opportunities are out there, working with the schools is a pretty easy thing to do. And then I would continue doing what I do right now, and that's, you're active in Kiwanis, you're active in Rotary, you're active in some of the other civic groups that are out there. You go to events and you're out in the community. People know who you are, or they will know who you are, and you engage with them. And you engage with them in regular, ordinary, everyday life activities, so you are connected to the community and what goes on.
I assume both of you have walked and continue, probably worn out your shoes, your walking shoes.
I broke 2 pairs of sandals this summer.
There you go. Starting with you, Tess, it's getting darker earlier in the evenings. How much of the city do you think you've covered?
Oh, we've covered the entire city and then some.
And how about you individually?
Well, not every street, but I have been in every single ward.
And how about you?
And for the primary.
And Sarah?
Same.
Yeah.
Same, and for the general.
And so when you come across a house that has a Sara sign, do you stop and talk to them?
I do, Peter, and I instruct the people who are helping me canvass to also do that, because like I said, I don't believe signs vote, and I've found that out in some situations, and it's worth, sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't, and I'll just say, just appreciate you taking a look at my information and for a comparison, and most people are very nice about it and appreciate the fact that I stopped.
How about you, Sarah?
Exactly the same. I mean, I don't know why a sign may be in the yard. You just don't know. And so particularly if somebody's outside, it's a great opportunity
Yes.
to talk to them. And so they have an opportunity to see you. I mean, you would expect people who are going to make intelligent voting decisions, other than our very best friends maybe, to look at all the information. And you want them to be educated and informed when they vote. And so I have no trouble talking to somebody who has Tess's sign or had another sign up, or even have a different council person sign up. It's not an issue.
So let's talk about council for a minute. We have our one elected official already. One of the arguments, one of the things that I've heard from people that I know is, well, you ran for a 4-year job and you're not going to finish it if you win. What do you say? What is your response to that?
My response is this. So council was an opportunity, obviously, which I didn't know that I would win. And I did. And I was privileged to win and proud the voters selected me. I don't look at it. Some people have said, oh, you're giving it up, or you're abandoning the public service. And I completely disagree. Running for judge is another opportunity. If I don't do it now, it's 6 years away that I would have to wait. I can't help the timing. And I always thought I'd run for it, but I wasn't certain. It just depended who was in the race. And there were a couple of my friends, one who was in it and decided to get out and is now supporting me. But I may have not stayed in it, depending who the final folks were. So I didn't want to give up an opportunity to perform intimate public service for my community on council for fear people were going to say, oh, she's going to run for judge. I mean, I don't operate that way. I grew up very humble, poor means, and everything I have had to work hard for, and I wasn't going to pass it up. And being judge of Lakewood is such a great opportunity to transform the court and make such a wonderful impact on the community. And if I didn't believe I would be the best candidate, I wouldn't have got in. And the time when I realized certain people were not going to, that's when I made the final decision.
And what do you think, Sara, about someone who probably walked and won her ward 22 months ago or so, and then deciding, well, probably at least 6 months ago, I'm going to run for a different job. What do you think? And
Well,
I have a two-part question.
Sure.
What do you think, and have you been asked about it maybe?
I have been asked about it often, and my response is generally this. With all due respect, I could have done the same thing. I could have run for the school board. I could have run for a council seat, for the purpose of that stepping stone. I chose not to do that because I didn't think it was the right thing to do. Because if you win, then what do you do? My view of it is if you make that commitment, you keep that commitment. There was no question that 2 years ago we knew Pat Carroll wasn't going to run again. We've known that for probably longer than that. And you just have to make that decision. And I wouldn't have made that decision. I knew that I was going to run. I wouldn't run for anything else. Because my view is you make a commitment, you keep it. But ultimately, that's up to the voters to decide.
That's a very, very fair answer, and I know you appreciate
Peter,
it.
yeah. And Peter, may I say,
Of course you may.
I disagree. Council is a stepping stone. It's not logical. Council is legislative. A judge is judicial. I've had my stepping stones. I've been a magistrate for 18 years, deciding cases, trials. Those are my stepping stones, and also as court administrator. So it's just, I understand why people would think that. But to say it's the only reason I did it, it honestly is personally hurtful to me because I'm an honest, transparent person, and I would never run for something to say, I'm going to do this because I think I can get more votes as judge. It's just silly.
Do you think there are issues that have come up during your time as a council person that people are questioning your conduct as they consider whether you should be the one they vote for?
Issues? I can't think of anything. If you've heard of some, let me know.
Well, the only time, again, and I'm just going to ask about the basketball court. I mean, that was, you're the head of the safety committee, which is a remarkable amount of responsibility. And then we have trouble with the basketball court on the eastern end. That's the only issue. I don't go to council meetings. Is that something people should look at when they're considering who to vote for? And I'll ask.
I mean,
let me go back. Let me ask you first. Should that be an issue they consider, and then you'll have a chance to respond.
Well, I think they're going to consider that issue and a whole bunch of other issues. I mean, we're putting our whole selves and careers out there, so they're going to consider all of those things. And considering performance in your most recent job, whether it's what we do as lawyers or performance on council, is a fair decision point.
Okay. And what, let me, let you respond to the issue of, should people look at what happened with the basketball court closing, opening, as a issue they can raise with you about whether you should be the one they vote for?
Yeah, and I actually hosted several public safety committees for people to voice their opinions, and we have to remember, council didn't decide to take the hoops down. Council didn't decide to put the hoops up. It was the mayor's administration and Lakewood Police Department based on evidence and information they had. And to this day, I trust the decisions that they made. People may disagree with those, but I personally spoke with Chief Kowchek, and so did rest of council. And, you know, they put them back up as soon as they thought it was safe to do so. And as far as, I mean, how could council or any of us be responsible for the shootings that took place? Obviously, you know, and that's where, once that person's arrested and charged, that's where the judge comes in, you know, to hold them accountable when they appear in the court.
Fair answer from both of you. Next issue, and that is the support that you've gained from other people as you run. You know, we've everybody receives flyers. Around the time of the primary, we were inundated almost on a daily basis. I know. And we got a little break, and now they're back. And I'm guessing the next 13 days we're going to get a few more, maybe none, but that would be surprising if we got none. The first question is, and I think we're back to Tess, is how do you decide who gets your flyer? Does everybody get your flyer no matter what? Or is it particular mailings to particular people?
No, what I've done is he's not a kid, he's a young 20-something, so to me he's a kid. And he checks the vote builder for me and tries to put together a group, and it's Democrats, Independents, Republicans, of who is likely to vote based on history. And so that's the group I'm working with. So when I do a mailer, I'm not just picking, oh, I just wanted to go to Peter Sackett, and I don't have time to do that for one, but it's going to the whole group. Okay. Unless they pulled an absentee ballot.
So have you then sent a flyer to everybody automatically, or never done that?
I don't know what you mean automatically. Well, when I do...
Have you mailed one to all 50,000?
Oh, no, it's broken down because not all 50,000 people will vote. Okay. So I think the group I had, if I recall, it was around 10,000 of the people who are likely going to vote based on voter history, based on similar primaries, similar general elections.
Okay, and how do you answer the question, Sara?
Exactly the same. You've got 35,000 registered voters. You'd be able to get one mailer out if you tried to mail to everybody. You know they're not going to vote based on their history. Those records are all at the Board of Elections. And so you do target towards the people you most likely think are going to vote. And if somebody pulls an absentee ballot that aren't on your list, then you might mail to them as well. But you're trying to focus your energy on people who are likely to vote.
Your literature notes the recommendations from lots of people. Yours from lots of people. Yours has on the list our most recent past mayor, and yours has the current mayor. Correct?
No.
Do I have the other way around?
No,
Well, I mean, I have Sarah's, and it says former mayor of Lakewood, Mike Summers.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, and Dave Harberger.
And Dave Harberger. So is the current mayor supporting who for judge?
She hasn't announced anything.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I take that back then. I apologize for that.
I understand the same.
How important is it to have the list of all the state senators and mayors and people on the literature? Is that with you?
You know, I don't think a judicial race should be political. You try to keep the politics out of it as much as you can. And I said this in the League of Women Voters, because Sara was just talking about she had Sherrod Brown. And I said, with all due respect, that's great, but Sherrod Brown doesn't know what it means to be in a court, and he's probably never appeared in one, and doesn't understand the operations. So I guess if you want to list them all, you can, but I've got a lot too, and it's just kind of, I guess, who can see who has more. I don't know that it's really important. What's important is the voters. They're the ones that matter, and they're the ones that vote.
How do you feel, Sara?
Well, I think the endorsements are important. I think it's offensive to suggest that Sara Brown doesn't know where the courtroom is, because he was in the Lakewood Municipal Court like 3 weeks ago.
Well, for a forum.
For a press release with the judge and with Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, and spoke quite plainly on why he was there and what he knew about the court, and actually told us all that he'd been friends with Pat Carroll for 40 years, so they'd known each other for a long time. And you know, he may be the U.S. Senator now, but he's got a history as well. So I think that's not a fair statement. But, you know, candidates try to get those endorsements, and people will endorse you for one reason or another. And I think those endorsements are important to the people that they speak to. So somebody may be spoken to by Sara Brown or Nikki Antonio or Dave Harbarger or the plain dealer. Somebody might be spoken to by the union endorsements. I think it's how people will evaluate your candidacy based on those endorsements, and you could talk to 10 different people and get 10 different opinions about what they think's important.
There are endorsements on your literature from unions. Mm-hmm. How does someone go about getting an endorsement from a union? Depends
on the union. I can tell you that some of them require you fill out documents like you do for Judge for Yourself or any of the other endorsements. Some of them do not. It really just depends on what their individual process is, and they're all a little bit different.
And how did you obtain the ones that you have?
I'm trying to think. I'd have to look at the list again, but Ports Council, I believe, was an application. Laborers 860 wasn't just there, chose to endorse. A couple others chose to endorse. I think Sherrod Brown's was an application. I'd have to look at the other list.
How about you, Tess? The issue of the union endorsement. Do you have any union? Do you have union endorsement?
Yes. Oh yeah. I have laborers, Local 310, the electrical workers, pipe fitters. I just got. My mom would be proud of this if she were alive. The bakers, confectionery, grain mills workers, and I have the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 25, which includes Lakewood as well.
And was Sara correct in how that process generally works?
Yeah, most of them, yes. But I will say, like, she mentioned Sherrod Brown, like, I did not apply for his endorsement.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that, I just want you to know that.
So I was coming back into town today, and I got off the Shoreway at downtown,
mm-hmm.
Shoreway and 25th. There is a billboard the size of that wall
mm-hmm.
that says something along the lines of juvenile court shouldn't be taking away my freedom of speech, Local 860.
Mm-hmm.
Local 860 is on your literature.
Mm-hmm.
What is that all about?
This is what it's about. It honestly is a personal attack on me.
Well, I find it. I don't mean to do that.
No, not you.
Okay.
It's just very unfortunate because it's undignified and it's very disrespectful to the bench. This is a judicial race and it should be civil. And there's an issue with the juvenile court. All the employees are there. In fact, our administrative judge just got them all raises that are equalized to the county jail corrections officers.
Yes.
And it's several legal issues in the collective bargaining agreement that the judges collectively and unanimously decided needed a legal interpretation. It's not factual. For over a year, we couldn't negotiate a contract. So I didn't get a vote on it. It's an issue that is absolutely out of my control. 860 knows that, but they're choosing to make me a scapegoat. For example, and it's disappointing, I thought my opponent, Sara, would talk to them about that. They put yard signs up with my name, with a circle and a line through.
In Lakewood?
Yes, on ramps, and they have threatened and intimidated me. That doesn't belong in a judicial race.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And my opponent is supported by them. As she said, unsolicited, she didn't apply. So you connect the dots as to why they're supporting her.
I'm sure you have an answer, reply to that
I do.
one.
First of all, I did apply. They were sent a letter like every other union was. So they didn't have a formal application process like several other unions didn't. 310 is one of the ones Tess has. They didn't have a formal application process either. And then the same with, I think, the pipe fitters or whichever.
No, they did. I filled out an application.
But 860 has their own issue with the juvenile court. And if you look at any of the news articles or any of the documents that are out there, I don't agree that they're using her as a scapegoat at all. I think there are some serious issues at the juvenile court. I don't know that I would be touting my administrative experience down there, because the judge did just get them raises, but my understanding, and again, I don't have any association with 860, they can do what they want. And how they choose to behave has nothing to do with me. But that was what they asked for a year ago. My understanding is there's litigation involved in it, so I'm not going to say any more about it than that.
Okay.
But I'm not coordinating with them. I have no idea what they're doing. And
But we are responsible for our supporters.
No, we're not. We are not. If our supporters choose to behave in a fashion that they want to behave, they can do that. That's up to them. It's their issue. And you can't pin that on me, because I don't control what they do. I can't tell them to stop, and even if I did, they could say, sorry, we're going to do what we want to do. It is a free country. They can do that.
So before we get to questions that may have, no questions on YouTube, okay.
No.
So before we try to finish up within our hour of allotted time, I have the Teddy Kennedy question. And that is, tell us why, I don't remember who's first, let's start with Sara. Tell us why you want to be judge of Lakewood Municipal Court.
Because I have the right experience. I have the experience that will actually, I'll hit that court from day one without any issue. I handle these cases all the time. I've handled these cases for 35 years as a municipal prosecutor, as a defense lawyer, as an attorney in private practice, handling all sorts of legal issues, both civil and criminal. So there won't be a case filed in that court that I haven't already handled, likely on both sides of any given issue. Nobody else has that experience. And so, you know, it's in-depth trial experience. I probably have, I don't know, 15 or 18 jury trials in my background, hundreds of bench trials. And it's not just hearing and making a decision, we're moving on. You know, Lakewood Court, in the days when Tess was a magistrate there, heard 10, 12,000 cases a year. You can only spend so much time on that kind of case. It's much different to be an advocate, to do the work, to represent a person and know what it feels like to have to live with that judge's decision. And I'm the only one here who has that experience. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Tell us, Tess, why do you want to be the judge of the Lakewood Municipal Court?
Okay. I believe I am the best and well-qualified candidate. I possess the temperament and the demeanor. I know how to address people in a civil manner and hear what they have to say. And I disagree that I don't have trial experience. I've presided over bench trials, thousands in Lakewood Court, and that's not including juvenile court, where you know, I presided over felonies. And I mean, municipal court is the people's court. The law is simple. There's statutes. It's not like you have to recreate, you know, the wheel on anything. But what you want to be creative with is how you address people, connecting them to the community, making sure that there's equal opportunities for people. As I said, the help kiosk, I do disagree with Sara on that. We've implemented it at juvenile court. They have it at domestic relations, and it's a godsend. And as long as you follow the rules, which everybody does. And I think it's really important to collect data. And this all goes to why I think I would be the best, because I know how to do that so that we can make sure we're guarding against implicit bias to prevent what you were talking about, someone getting a better deal than another. And for all those reasons, you know, being an attorney 29 years, a judicial magistrate, acting judge, combined 18 years in 2 courts, a court administrator, you know, responsible for a large organization, the management. I mean, I've done it all. And I've also, early in my career, represented clients. I understand advocacy. In fact, to me, a judge needs to exercise restraint in applying the law properly and be an advocate to make sure you're getting people the resources and the education and things they need to be successful in the community.
So do you have a question for your, I hate to say opponent, for Tess, that you think I haven't asked, that you think would be important to have asked? And the same question will go to you.
Okay.
Are there questions that you've wondered whether you would have a chance to hear an answer to from either of you? I want to tell you who needs to go first. Just let it go.
That's an interesting question.
I don't know.
I would guess I would ask about trial experience. Have you ever tried a jury trial?
No, but I think you just don't understand, Sarah. Like, my broad breadth of experience, I've been on both sides. I've had the bird's eye view of seeing the prosecutor side, the defense side. That's experience you can never get without sitting on the bench. And 18 years of that, I mean, I know prosecutors who are not good judges. I mean, just because you've been in a field 32 years does not mean the person's going to be a good judge. I have the demonstrated history of it, of treating people well, listening to them, and I know I would be an asset to the Lakewood Court.
You certainly can respond any way you'd like, or not at all.
Well, I would say that, you know, that bird's eye view might be interesting, but I've had the front row seat. And it does make a difference. And as an advocate, you do need to know both sides of the case. You're going to write a set of jury instructions, you better know what the other side's going to argue. Because I've had to do it. I mean, you've got to know what your opponent's going to do. I remember my dad, who was in law enforcement and worked both as an investigator in the public defender's office and then in the district attorney's office, prosecutor's office in New York. You know, he would always say, the best criminal defense lawyers are former prosecutors, and the best prosecutors are former defense lawyers, because they understand both sides of the case. And you have to have that in-depth knowledge to manage these cases. So.
Well, I appreciate everybody watching the performance this evening of these two highly intelligent, very kind, these are very kind people here, very much, both of them ready to take on the responsibilities of a 6-year term as the head of the Lakewood Municipal Court. You each can make what I will call a very informal closing argument if you didn't just make it. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the people who are watching? Or we can conclude now. It's up to you two. We have plenty of time, or we can conclude.
I would just say, you know, I've been working since I was 12 years old. I help bus tables at the restaurant my mom worked at. My dad worked at the Brook Park Ford plant. And we grew up very humbly. I went to college only because I paid for myself. First in my family history, I'm the oldest of 7 to ever go to college. And I worked as a police officer 3 years so that I could save money, and I borrowed money so that I could go to law school here in Cleveland. And I've worked hard. I've worked with the people on the ground. Those are the people that are coming through Lakewood Court. I relate to them. I know our community very well. I've been involved, been a member of the community 33 years, raised our children there, and we love it and have no intention of leaving. And I know I would make a great impact, not just on the court, but on the community. I know many of the people who still work at the court, and I would look forward to working with them to help improve the court.
Thank you. And Sarah, you get the last word, kiddo.
Not very often.
There you go.
Thank you, Peter, first of all, for having us tonight. I appreciate you and your colleagues putting this forum together for us and taking the time to do it. I know it was an effort on your part. I would just say that, you know, look, in 35 years, you know, I've had a single career. I haven't changed. It's all been progressively responsible experience. And because I've worked in municipal law for so long, it included plenty of the administrative experience, plenty of the budgeting experience. I had to do all of those things. And I've looked at all that information for the municipal court. It won't be hard to make that transition and do that. But I think most importantly is having the right experience, having worked with the cases that come before the municipal court. They're not simple. They are not simple. You know, I've handled 4 or 5 vehicular manslaughter cases. They're misdemeanors, even though somebody dies, okay? And I've handled those from the day they happen, through the investigation, through the charging process, and then through the conclusion of the case. They're difficult. And the only person who I thought had it more difficult than I did as the prosecutor and certainly the victims' families are the judges trying to decide what to do with these cases. And if you haven't seen one, they're not so easy. So I think all of that experience is really important, and I will make a commitment to the community that I'm not going anywhere. I get elected, I'll be there for the duration. I'm not looking for anything else. And I, likewise, 37 years in this community, we chose Lakewood. After looking all over Cleveland, we chose Lakewood to live in. Likewise, I've raised our families here. I've been involved in lots of community organizations, from school organizations the community, Kiwanis and other kinds of charitable organizations. We've been very involved in the community. I intend to stay involved in the community, and I think I have the best qualifications for the role.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I know
Thank
you're
you.
both tired, worked all day, probably got to go out and walk first thing in the morning. And thank you all for watching this evening. I hope you have all learned more about these, again, extraordinary candidates for our judgeship in Lakewood. Thank you very much.